Problem 1, a babysitter earns $8 an hour for babysitting 2 children, and it says an additional $3 tip when both children are put to bed on time. If the babysitter gets the children to bed on time, what expression could be used to determine how much the babysitter earned? X is going to stand for, in letters A and B, the number of hours, letters C and D, the number of children. Well, this one here doesn't mention how many children. Here it mentions $8 per hour. So I can immediately eliminate choices C and D. If X is the number of hours and they get paid $8 an hour, so for the first hour it'd be 8 times 1, the second hour 8 times 2, the third hour 8 times 3, so for X hours, 8 times X. And then you have a $3 tip if the kids are put to bed on time. This one says the kids are put to bed on time, so we're going to add the $3 tip, and that makes here our answer, letter A. Problem 2, it says if 3 parentheses x plus y is equal to y, x comma y is a solution to the equation, what is the ratio of x to y? Well, here we're going to do some math. When you see parentheses, you should hopefully immediately think to distribute. So here we're going to have 3x plus 3y equals y. Now, a lot of times in these equations, you have to solve for x. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to get this x by itself. So here I'm going to subtract y on both sides. So when I subtract 3y on both sides, I'm going to have 1y. Take away 3y gives me a negative 2y. And then here to solve for x, I'll divide both sides by 3. So here I have x is equal to negative 2y over 3. Well, the question doesn't ask for x. The question asks for what does x over y equal? Well, since I know x is negative 2y over 3, what I'll do is I'll take out this x and I'll put in negative 2y over 3. So I'm going to have x, which is negative 2y over 3, over y. Well, this is a fraction. It's the same as divided by. So this is negative 2y over 3. There's my numerator. The fraction means divided by y. Well, when you were taught to divide fractions, the math rule is to invert and multiply. So basically what that means is I'm going to have negative 2y over 3, divided by becomes times, and y over 1 now becomes 1 over y. Here, this y and this y cancel, so I'm going to be left with negative 2 times 1, or negative 2, 3 times 1, because the y canceled, is just 3. So here, x over y is equal to negative 2/3, or answer choice B. There's a lot of arithmetic that's on the SATs, and this one here just tests whether you can solve equations, and then remember the way you divide fractions is to invert and multiply. Problem 3. Here you're given a system of equations, meaning in this case 2 equations and 2 unknowns. And here I need to find the solution, which ordered pair, x and y, satisfies those equations. So one trick that you can use when you see fractions is to multiply the equations by the lowest common denominator. So here I'm going to take the first equation and multiply it by 4. Why do I do that? Well, 4 times a half x, well, half of 4 is 2, so that's going to become 2x. 4 times negative a quarter y. Well, the 4 and the 4 cancel, so you're just going to be left with negative y, and then 4 times 10 is 40. The second equation, I'm going to multiply it by 8, which is the lowest common denominator. So 8 times 1/8, here the 2 8s cancel, so we have 1x. 8 times negative 1/8 y, again the 8 and the 8 cancel, so you're left with negative 1y. And then here you have 8 times 19, which is equal to 152. See, the reason why we multiplied by the lowest common denominators is to make the fractions disappear. Well, now I have a system of equations, 2 letters, 2 variables, 2 unknowns. So what I'm going to do is, since this top equation has a negative y and the bottom equation is a negative y, I'm just going to multiply the bottom equation by -1 to make the y's cancel. So my first equation is going to stay as 2x minus y equals 40. The second equation becomes -1x. A -1 times a -1y is a positive y. And then -1 times 52 is -1 times 152 is -152. See, I did that so that the negative y and the positive y cancel. We're going to add the equations together. So 2x minus 1x is just 1x. And then 40 minus 152 is -112. Now, one of the tricks that you should learn when you take the SATs is to try not to do too much work. Here I know x is equal to -112. Well, look at all these points. Look at all these answer choices. The answer choices are x, comma, y. Points always have the x value followed by the y value. Well, which of these answer choices has x as -112? Here, answer choice A, x is -112. So that's why the answer to this question is letter A. Now, if you needed to find what y was, you could take -112, which is x, plug it back into one of the equations and solve for y. But for the SATs, you want to learn that you don't want to do too much. So in this case here, the answer is letter A. For problem 4, in triangle ABC, it's isosceles. It has 2 equal or congruent sides. So in this case, AB is congruent to AC. And then it says the ratio of DE to DF, is 5 to 7. What is the length of side DC? Well, this question comes down to similar triangles. And in order for 2 triangles to be similar, they need to have 2 congruent angles, 2 corresponding sets of congruent angles. Triangle BED and CFD are similar. They're similar because they each have a right angle. And since the big triangle is isosceles and AB equals AC, you know that angle B equals angle C because they're the base angles of the big isosceles triangle. So these 2 smaller triangles are similar. What does that mean? That means all of the corresponding sides are in the same ratio. So the ratio of DE to DF, they told you in the problem, was 5 to 7. The ratio then of BE to CF is 5 to 7. And the ratio of BD to DC is 5 to 7. Now, it doesn't mean all of those sides are each equal to 5 and each of those sides is each equal to 7. That means their ratio is 5 to 7. It could be that DE is 10 and DF is 14. Because if you reduce that fraction, 10 over 14, that's also 5 over 7. So here the question tells you that BC, the entire bottom, is equal to 48. Well, since I know BD to DC, the ratio is 5 to 7, what I'm going to do is I'm going to put an X at the end of each of those values. So I know that 5X plus 7X has to equal, in this case, the entire bottom, or 48. So that tells me that 12x equals 48. So if I divide both sides by 12, that tells me that x is equal to 4. So the question in this problem says, what is DC equal to? Well, DC is right here. That was the 7x, right? Because BD was 5x. Well, since x is 4, 7x is going to be equal to 7 times 4, or letter D, 28. Problem 5. In a certain game, a player can solve easy or hard puzzles. A player earns 30 points for solving easy puzzles, 60 points for solving hard puzzles. They solved a total of 50 puzzles playing this game, earning 1,950 points. How many hard puzzles did Tina solve? Well, I'm going to let x be equal to the number of easy puzzles. I'm going to let y be equal to the number of hard puzzles. And now, since I have two variables, x and y, I'm going to use two equations. The question said Tina earns 30 points for solving an easy puzzle, so that's going to be 30 times x. 60 points for solving a hard puzzle, so that's going to be 60 plus y, and if I add up the total points, she earned 1,950 points overall. It also says she solved a total of 50 puzzles. So if I add up the number of easy puzzles, x, plus the number of hard puzzles, y, that's going to be 50. So now I'm going to have a system of equations, two equations and two unknowns. I'm going to solve this by multiplying by negative 30 to the second equation. Why am I doing that? Because then the 30x from the first equation and the negative 30x from the second equation will cancel. So here the first equation is just going to stay as 30x plus 60y equals 1950. When I distribute the negative 30, I'm going to have negative 30x, negative 30y, and then negative 30 times 50 is negative 1,500. Now I'm going to add the equations together because the x's will cancel, and that tells me that's 60y minus 30y, so that's 30y. That equals 1950 minus 1,500, or 450. And if I divide both sides by 30, that tells me that y is going to be equal to 15. Why is that good? Because the question says, how many hard puzzles did Tina solve? Well, y was the number of hard puzzles, so in this case, y is going to be 15, or answer choice B. Problem 6, R and S are the two solutions to the equation above. So this equation above, 2x squared plus 7x minus 15 equals 0. R and S are the two solutions, the two answers, and R is greater than S, so that tells me that R is the larger solution. So let's try to figure out what R and S are. Let's try to figure out what the solutions, what the answers to this equation are. This is a quadratic equation. I could solve it by either factoring or by using the quadratic formula. Here, since I have 2x squared, I'm going to put 2x and x. And here I'm going to look for factors of negative 15 that when I put in these spots can combine to give me a positive 7x. So in this case, I'm going to put a positive 5 with the x, a negative 3 with the 2x, because negative 3 times positive 5 is negative 15. But now when I do the outers and the inners, the outers, 2x times 5 is 10x. The inners, negative 3 times x is negative 3x. They combine to give me a positive 7x, which is what the middle term is. So I have the two factors for that polynomial. And now the way we solve this by factoring is we set each of these factors equal to 0, and we solve. So here I'm going to put 2x minus 3 equals 0. I'm going to put x plus 5 equals 0, and I'm going to solve. So here I'm going to add 3. So I have 2x is equal to 3, and if I divide both sides by 2, I get x is equal to 1.5, 1.5. And here when I subtract 5 on both sides, here I get x is equal to negative 5. So the two solutions, the two answers, are 1.5, 1.5, and negative 5. Now the question said R and S are the two answers. So R and S, one of them is going to be 1.5, one of them is going to be negative 5, but it said that R is bigger than S. So which of the two answers is bigger, a positive or a negative? Well, a positive is always bigger than a negative, so R is going to be 1.5, S is going to be negative 5. Now the question says, what is the value of R minus S? So here, R minus S, R is 1.5, S is negative 5. So if I do 1.5 minus negative 5, I get a positive 6.5, which as a fraction is answer choice B, 13/2. Problem 7, to cut a lawn, Alan charges a fee of $15 for his equipment and $8.50 per hour spent cutting a lawn. So Alan charges a $15 fee plus $8.50, 8.50, times the number of hours that they spend cutting the lawn. Taylor charges a fee of $12 and $9.25 per hour spent cutting the lawn. X represents the number of hours. I kind of went into it with X being equal to the number of hours because it just made sense to say, okay, for Alan, if it's $8.50 an hour and he works, let's say 3 hours, you would do $8.50 times 3. Well, he's not working 3 hours, he's working X hours, so you do $8.50 times X. Now the question said, what are all the values of X for which Taylor's charge is greater than Alan's? So I want Taylor's to be greater than Alan's. Well, Taylor's is 12 plus 9.25x. I want that to be greater than Alan's, which is 15 plus 8.50x. So this question comes down to you solving a good old-fashioned inequality. So here we're going to solve this like we would solve an equation. I'm going to subtract 8.50x on both sides. So that gives me 12 plus 0.75x is greater than 15. Here I'll subtract 12. So I'm going to have 0.75x is greater than 3. And here I'm going to divide both sides by 0.75. The only thing you have to remember when you solve inequalities is that if you multiply or divide both sides by a negative, the inequality sign has to be flipped around. So if you multiply or divide by a negative, here I'm dividing, but not by a negative, I'm dividing by positive 0.75. So this greater than symbol is going to stay. So here I'm going to get x is greater than, and then 3 divided by 0.75, that's going to give me 4. So here my answer is answer choice A, x is greater than 4. Problem 8, the equation above is used to model the relationship between the number of cups, N, of hot chocolate and the average daily temperature, T, in degrees. According to the model, what is the meaning of this 3? There are a lot of questions like this on the SAT where they give you an equation and they ask you to analyze what the numbers in the equation represent. So they want to know what this 3 represents. So one of the ways you can go about doing these problems is just to start choosing values for one of the letters and figure out what happens to the other letter. So I know, for example, the temperature is T in degrees Fahrenheit. So let's say it's 90 degrees. Let's say T is equal to 90. What is N? How many cups of hot chocolate will they sell? Well, since N is equal to 456 minus 3T, and I pretended that the temperature was 90, if I do 456 minus 3 times 90, that tells me that N, the number of cups of hot chocolate, is equal to 186. So they would sell 186 cups of hot chocolate when it's 90 degrees. Now, look at the questions. Letter A says, for every increase in 3 degrees, 1 more cup of hot chocolate will be sold. Well, it was 90. If the temperature increased 3 degrees, now the temperature is 93. If I plug into the equation, N is equal to 456 minus 3T, that's going to be 456 minus 3 times 93. So if I calculate that, that gives me 177. So when the temperature increased 3 degrees, they went from 186 cups of hot chocolate down to 177. That looks like a drop of 9 cups. Well, letter A says, for every increase in 3 degrees, 1 more cup of hot chocolate will be sold. That's not true. It looks like 9 less cups. So letter A is incorrect. Letter B, for every decrease of 3 degrees. Well, I assumed it was 90 degrees. If it's a decrease of 3, now the temperature is 87. If I go 456 minus 3 times T, or in this case 456 minus 3 times 87, now the number of cups of hot chocolate sold is 195. So it increased from 186 to 195. So it looks like it increased by 9. Well, that doesn't say that. This says for every decrease of 3, 1 more cup of hot chocolate will be sold. That's not true. I decreased the temperature by 3, and 9 more cups of hot chocolate will be sold. So letters C and D talk about now an increase or a decrease of 1 degree Fahrenheit. So letter C, it says it increases by 1, so now T would be 91. 456 minus 3 times T, 456 minus 3 times 91. Now the number of cups of hot chocolate is 183. So it says if for every increase of 1 degree, 3 more cups of hot chocolate will be sold. No, 3 less cups of hot chocolate will be sold. I'm guessing the answer is letter D. For every decrease of 1 degree, 3 more cups of hot chocolate, right? Pretend it was 91. If it's 91, they sell 183 cups. If the temperature decreased to 90, they would sell 186, or an increase of 3 cups. So that's why, after doing all that work, the answer is letter D. So there are a lot of questions like that on the SATs which ask you what the values given in the equation represent. Problem 9. A truck enters a stretch of road that drops 4 meters in elevation for every 100 meters along the length of the road. So the road is going down. It says the truck enters the stretch of the road that drops 4 meters in elevation every 100 meters. So if they travel 100 meters, the elevation drops 4 meters. So the next 100 meters, the elevation drops 4 meters. The road is at 1,300 meters elevation where the truck entered. So this height right here is 1,300 meters in elevation. The truck is traveling 16 meters per second along the road. So I'll let x, or in this case t, be equal to the number of seconds. What is the elevation of the road in meters at the point where the truck passes t seconds after entering the road? When they give you questions like this, what I like to do is to choose a number for the variable and answer the question with that number. So let's say the question said, what is the elevation of the road in meters at a point where the truck passes, let's say, 10 seconds. Let's go t is equal to 10. The truck is traveling for 10 seconds. Well, since they're traveling 16 meters per second down the hill, and they're going for 10 seconds, the truck has traveled 16 times t, or 16 times 10, or 160 meters. What would the elevation be? Well, since it's 4 meters for every 100 meters driven, in my example, the truck traveled 160 meters. How many meters did it drop from the 1,300? So if I solve this proportion for x, I'm going to cross multiply. 100 times x is 100x. 4 times 160 is 640. So that means x, the number of meters dropped, is 6.4 meters dropped. So the truck started off at 1,300 meters. It dropped 6.4 meters, which means the truck's elevation is 1,293 0.6 meters. Which of these answer choices, when I plug in t as 10, gives me 1293.6? Well, if you take a look at letter B, 1300 minus 0.64 times t. In my example, I chose t to be 10. So if I do 0.64 times 10, so that's going to be 6.4. If I do 1300 minus 6.4, that gives me 1293.6, or what I got when I tried to answer the question with t is equal to 10. So here our answer is letter B. A lot of times when they give you questions like this, it's best to choose a convenient number, try to answer the question with that convenient number, and then plug in your convenient number into the answer choices to see which gives you a match. Finally, number 10 gives you function notation with a little twist. Here they give you the function f of x minus 1 equals 2x plus 3. Here they want you to find the value of f of negative 3. And most of the time when they give you these functions, they don't give you the rule as f of x minus 1. They give you f of x equals 2x plus 3. And if they say, okay, what is f of negative 3? You would just basically plug in negative 3 for the x. So here you would get your answer of, I believe, negative 3 possibly. But that's not what the question is asking or telling you. They're not telling you f of x is equal to 2x plus 3. They're telling you f of x minus 1 is 2x minus 3. So here's what we're going to do. We'll take f of x minus 1 equals 2x plus 3. I want to find the value of f of negative 3. So what I'm going to do is this. This and this have to be the same. So here x minus 1 has to be negative 3. Well, what is x? If x minus 1 equals negative 3, if I add 1 to both sides, x is equal to negative 3 plus 1, or negative 2. So I know that x is equal to negative 2, and now I'll plug that in for x. So that's going to be 2 times negative 2 plus 3, or negative 4 plus 3, or negative 1, or answer choice D.